They say a man like Min Jae-sung doesn't chase, he commands. He points, and empires kneel. Boardrooms empty, rivals vanish. So when I woke up in his penthouse suite overlooking Seoul, wearing a silk robe that cost more than my annual salary, I told myself the same lie I'd been telling myself for 3 years. This isn't real. Men like him don't choose women like me. I'm 42. I have laugh lines and a body that's carried me through 2 decades of corporate warfare. I know how this works. Powerful men collect beautiful young things, not women who remember when flip phones were revolutionary. But as Min Jae-sung crossed that bedroom with the focused intensity of a predator who'd finally cornered his prey, I realized the real danger wasn't his reputation for ruthlessness. It was the terrifying possibility that when he looked at me, he saw exactly what he'd been searching for all along. Before this goes any further, if you've ever been told you were too old, too late, or past your time, don't walk away from her story now. Like this video and subscribe. Because if Vivienne can still be chosen, so can you. The apartment wasn't an apartment. It was a declaration of war against anyone foolish enough to think they could reach him. Floor-to-ceiling bulletproof glass, biometric locks on every door, security cameras hidden in the crown molding like electronic ravens watching my every breath. I counted 6 guards on my first morning there, all of them moving through the space with the silent efficiency of men who'd killed before and would again without hesitation. Min Jae-sung called it protection. I called it a gilded cage with a view of the Han River. I woke up alone in his bed, the sheets still warm where his body had been. No note, no explanation, just a black garment bag hanging on the closet door like a question I hadn't agreed to answer. Inside was a dress that probably cost more than my first car. Midnight blue silk that caught the light like oil on water, cut low enough to make a statement, fitted enough to show every curve I'd spent 42 years earning. The kind of dress a man buys when he wants to display his prize. I held it up to my body in the mirror and felt something cold settle in my chest. This wasn't my world. I was a woman who wore sensible heels and blazers that hid my stomach. Who chose black because it was slimming and safe? This dress demanded to be seen, and I'd spent the last 3 years trying very hard to be invisible. When Jae-sung returned that evening, I was standing by the window in my jeans and sweater, the dress still in its bag. He stopped in the doorway, suit jacket draped over one arm, eyes moving from me to the untouched garment bag with the calculating precision of a man reading a chessboard. "You don't like it," he said. Not a question. "I don't know what this is," I answered, gesturing at the opulent prison around us. "Yesterday I was a consultant. Today I'm living in a fortress wearing clothes I didn't choose. Tomorrow I'm supposed to attend some gala where everyone will wonder what a woman my age is doing on your arm." He crossed the room slowly, deliberately, set his jacket on the chair, loosened his tie with one hand while those dark eyes never left my face. When he stopped in front of me, close enough that I could smell cedar and something darker underneath, he reached out and touched my chin, tilting my face up to his. "You think I'm dressing you up like a doll," he said quietly, "playing pretend with something I'll discard when I'm bored." "Aren't you?" His thumb traced my bottom lip, the gesture possessive and tender in equal measure. "I'm taking you to that gala so every man who ever looked past you can see what I see, so they can choke on their regret." His grip tightened slightly. "You're not a toy, Vivienne. You're a reckoning." I should have pulled away, should have told him that I wasn't a weapon for his ego. But the heat in his eyes wasn't about conquest. It was about vindication. And God help me, I wanted to believe him. The whisper came from behind me while I was reviewing structural plans in Jae-sung's private study. I didn't hear him enter. That should have been my first warning. "You're wondering how long this will last." His voice was smooth, cultured, perfect English with just enough accent to sound exotic rather than foreign. I turned to find one of Jae-sung's senior advisors, Kim something. I'd met him once at dinner, leaning against the doorframe like he owned the space. Designer suit, Rolex, the kind of polished cruelty that came with generational wealth. "Excuse me," he smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Forgive my directness, Ms. Amnell, But in our culture, we value honesty over delusion. He stepped further into the room, hands in his pockets, casual as a knife sliding between ribs. Jae-sung has always had eclectic tastes. Last year it was a Swedish model, before that a Japanese heiress. He enjoys the novelty of foreign things. I kept my face blank, but something cold settled in my chest. I'm not sure what you're implying. I'm not implying anything, I'm telling you. He picked up one of my sketches, examined it with theatrical interest. You're intelligent, accomplished, exotic in all the right ways. I can see the appeal. His eyes dragged over me, clinical and dismissive. But Seoul isn't Atlanta. Here, a man of Jae-sung's position doesn't build a future with distractions, especially not ones who've already lived half their lives. There it was. The thing I'd been waiting for someone to say out loud. He needs a wife who can navigate the social complexities of our world, someone young enough to bear heirs, someone whose family brings strategic value. Kim set down my sketch like it was contaminated. Someone who looks appropriate standing next to him at the events that matter. You understand. I understood perfectly. I was 42, Black, American, and childless. In his calculus, I was 3 strikes and a walk. Does Jae-sung know you're here? My voice came out steadier than I felt. Jae-sung pays me to protect his interests. Sometimes that means protecting him from himself. He moved toward the door, then paused. Enjoy the penthouse while it lasts, Ms. Amnell. Men like him always return to what's expected. And you, he smiled again, pitying now. You were never going to be that. The door clicked shut. I stood there in the silence, surrounded by blueprints for a building I was designing for a man who apparently saw me as temporary infrastructure. My hands were shaking, not with rage, with the terrible confirmation of every doubt I'd been swallowing since I woke up in Jae-sung's bed. I was a phase, an exotic midlife crisis wrapped in brown skin and professional competence, and the worst part? I'd almost let myself believe otherwise. I wasn't prepared for Yuna. Seo-Jin had mentioned her once in passing, the way you mention a closed chapter. My father's choice, he'd said, voice flat, a merger disguised as a marriage. I'd assumed she was gone, a relic of his past tucked away like those crossed-out names on his forearms. I was wrong. She arrived on a Thursday morning while Seo-Jin was handling business in Gangnam. I was in the residential library reviewing structural plans for the club's East Wing expansion when I heard it. Laughter. High and crystalline, echoing through the marble hallways like wind chimes made of glass. Then her voice, speaking rapid Korean to the house staff, each syllable sharp and precise. I looked up just as she entered the library doorway. She was devastating. 24 and flawless in the way only youth and generational wealth can create. Porcelain skin that had never known a sleepless night. Long black hair that fell like silk down her back. A white Chanel suit that probably cost more than my first car. But it was her eyes that struck me. Dark and calculating, scanning me the way an appraiser evaluates damaged goods. "Oh," she said in perfect English, her lips curving into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You must be the architect." I stood, extending my hand, professional, courteous. "Vivienne Amnell." She stared at my hand like I'd offered her something contaminated, then turned to the housekeeper hovering nervously behind her. She spoke in Korean, gesturing dismissively in my direction. I didn't understand the words, but I understood the tone. The housekeeper's face flushed with embarrassment. "I'm sorry," Yuna said, switching back to English with theatrical politeness. "I was just asking Mrs. Cho if Seo-Jin has started hiring foreign help for domestic positions now. The language barrier must make things so difficult." The insult landed precisely where she'd aimed it. Heat crawled up my neck. "I'm the lead structural consultant," I said evenly. "Not staff." "Of course." She moved closer, circling me slowly like a predator assessing prey. Her gaze traveled across my face, lingering on the fine lines at the corners of my eyes, the laugh lines I'd earned from 42 years of living. How refreshing. Seo-Jin always did have such eclectic tastes, though I must say, I'm surprised he's branching out into the vintage market. Vintage? The word hit like a slap. She leaned against the desk, examining her perfect manicured nails. It's just that wrinkles show so much more on darker skin, don't they? The contrast. You must spend a fortune on creams. Her smile widened. Not that it seems to be working. I should have walked away, should have maintained dignity and distance, but something in her cruelty cracked something in me. All those years of being overlooked, diminished, erased by men who wanted newer models. All those nights convincing myself I was fine alone because the alternative was this. Being dissected by someone who wore her youth like armor. Does Seo-Jin know you're here? My voice came out colder than I intended. Oh, darling, Yuna laughed, the sound like breaking glass. Seo-Jin will always make time for me. We have history, real history, not just a temporary fascination with something exotic and... She paused, eyes raking over me. Experienced. The door opened behind her. Seo-Jin stood in the doorway, his expression carved from stone. I found Vivienne in the West Wing bathroom, mascara streaking down her beautiful face like war paint. She didn't hear me enter. She was staring at her reflection with an expression I recognized, the look of a woman cataloging her own perceived failures, the slight softness at her jawline, the faint lines around her eyes, the body that had lived 42 years instead of 25. I watched her for 3 seconds. That's all the time it took for rage to replace every other emotion in my body. Who said it? My voice came out flat, controlled. The tone I used right before I ended someone's existence. She startled, spinning around. Those dark eyes went wide. Jae-sung, I didn't... Who said it? It doesn't matter. She wiped at her face quickly, trying to compose herself, trying to rebuild the armor I'd watched her wear like a second skin since the day she walked into my building and told me my infrastructure was garbage. It's fine. I'm fine. I crossed the space between us in 2 strides. My hand found her chin, tilting her face up so she couldn't look away. You're crying in my bathroom. Someone made you feel less than what you are. So I'll ask one more time, and if you don't answer, I'll have every person who's spoken to you today brought here so you can point. Her breath hitched, not from fear, from something else. Something that made her pupils dilate even as she tried to pull away. Your lieutenant, the one with the scar, he said I was... She swallowed hard. He said I was a diversity experiment, that you'd get bored once the novelty wore off, that men like you don't keep women like me. The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear her breathing, could feel her pulse jumping beneath my thumb, could see the exact moment she realized she'd just signed someone's death warrant. Jae-sung, please. He's already dead. I said it simply. Factually. The way another man might comment on the weather. He just doesn't know it yet. You can't just... I can. I moved closer, backing her against the marble counter. Close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. Close enough that she could feel exactly how serious I was. You think I collected you like some men collect cars? You think this is a phase? My other hand came up, fingers threading through her hair. Gentle, possessive. I've built an empire on fear and blood. I've made men beg for mercy I never gave. But you? You're the only thing in this entire city that makes me feel like I'm not just a monster in expensive suits. Tears welled in her eyes again, but these were different. These weren't from shame. Any insult to you is treason against me, I continued, my voice dropping to something darker, something absolute. And I don't forgive treason, not from rivals, not from allies, not from anyone. I leaned down until my lips nearly brushed her ear. You are mine, Vivienne, and I protect what's mine with the same brutality I use to destroy my enemies. Do you understand? She nodded, trembling. Not from fear, from the weight of being claimed by someone who meant every word. Good, I whispered. Now let me see you smile, because that bastard's last sight will be your face, happy. The gala was everything I'd feared it would be. crystal chandeliers throwing fractured light across Seoul's elite, women draped in designer gowns that cost more than my first car, men in tailored suits discussing mergers over single malt scotch. I felt like an imposter in the emerald silk dress Jae-sung had chosen for me, the fabric clinging to curves that gravity had reshaped over 42 years. Every mirror I passed reminded me I didn't belong here. Yuna arrived like a vision designed specifically to destroy me. 24, porcelain skin, a body that defied physics in a white gown that probably required architectural engineering. She moved through the crowd with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no, never been looked past, never had to wonder if her expiration date had passed. When her eyes found me across the room, her smile was surgical precision. I should have seen it coming, should have stayed near Jae-sung. But he'd been pulled into conversations with men whose handshakes could topple governments, and I drifted toward the balcony, needing air, needing escape from the weight of being watched. Yuna appeared beside me holding 2 glasses of wine, her perfume expensive and cloying. "You must be Vivienne," she said, her English perfect, her tone dripping with manufactured sweetness. Jae-sung's consultant. The pause before consultant was deliberate, designed to wound. I accepted the glass she offered, my fingers steady even as my stomach twisted. "And you must be Yuna. I've heard so much about you." "I'm sure you have." She took a sip, those perfect lips barely touching the rim. "It's so refreshing that Jae-sung is being adventurous these days, exploring different markets." Her gaze traveled down my body with the cold assessment of someone appraising livestock. "Tell me, how does it feel to be his midlife crisis?" The words hit exactly where she'd aimed them. Every insecurity I'd carried into this room crystallized into shame. I opened my mouth to respond, to salvage some dignity, when her hand jerked forward. Red wine splashed across the emerald silk, spreading like blood across my chest and stomach. The conversation around us died instantly. Yuna's hand flew to her mouth in mock horror, but her eyes sparkled with satisfaction. "Oh no! I'm so clumsy!" Her voice carried across the suddenly silent ballroom, pitched perfectly for maximum humiliation. "Though, I suppose it doesn't matter much. You can't really stain expired fruit, can you? It's already past its best." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Quiet, vicious, the kind that slices deeper than screaming. I stood there, wine dripping onto the marble floor, every eye in the room waiting for me to crumble, waiting for the old woman to cry, to run, to confirm everything they already believed about me. The room held its breath. And so did I. The ballroom went silent when Min Jae-sung entered. I felt it before I saw him. The way every conversation died mid-sentence, the way heads turned like sunflowers tracking light. He stood in the doorway wearing a midnight blue suit that probably cost more than my first car. His expression carved from stone. The Seoul elite had gathered for this moment, waiting to see the infamous corporate titan pay homage to the old guard, waiting to watch him bow to tradition. He didn't even glance at them. His eyes found me across that sea of designer gowns and diamond-dripping necks, found me standing there with red wine soaking into the cream silk he'd bought me, with that beautiful viper Yuna smirking at my side. Found me trying so hard not to crumble in front of these people who'd spent the last hour reminding me I didn't belong. Every step he took toward me was deliberate, measured, the kind of walk that said he'd already decided something, and nothing in this world would change his mind. The crowd parted without him asking. Even Yuna's smile faltered as he approached, something like fear flickering across her perfect face. He stopped directly in front of me. I waited for him to pull me aside, to handle this privately, to salvage whatever political capital he'd lose by defending the 42-year-old American woman they all saw as his temporary fascination. Instead, Min Jae-sung dropped to one knee. The gasp that rippled through the ballroom was audible. I heard it, felt it. Somewhere behind me, an elderly woman made a strangled sound of shock, but Jae-sung's eyes never left mine as he reached up, fingers working the knot of his silk tie, deep burgundy, probably worth more than the wine now staining my dress. He pulled it free in one smooth motion, the fabric whispering against his collar. "Jae-sung, what are you— Don't move!" His voice was low, commanding. The voice that closed billion-dollar deals and ended careers with a single phone call. But his hands were gentle as they found the hem of my dress, as he used his own tie, the one his grandfather had given him, I'd learn later, to carefully blot the wine from the silk. The room held its breath. When he finished, he rose slowly, his hand finding the small of my back with a possessiveness that left no room for interpretation. He turned to face the crowd, to face Yuna and the elders and everyone who'd spent the evening treating me like a temporary inconvenience. "This woman," he said, voice carrying across the silent ballroom, "is my choice, not my phase, not my distraction, my future." His fingers tightened against my spine. "Anyone who disrespects her disrespects me, and I think we all know how I handle disrespect." Yuna's face went white. The room erupted in frantic whispers, and I stood there, heart hammering, finally understanding what it meant to be claimed by a man who'd burn his entire world down just to prove I was worth the ashes. The folder landed on the table between us with a sound that felt too loud in the silence of his study. Black leather, unmarked, impossibly thin. I stared at it like it might detonate. "Open it," Min Jae-sung said, his voice carrying that same quiet command that had first unraveled me weeks ago. My fingers trembled as I pulled back the cover. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. Me leaving a construction site in Chicago, hair pulled back, hard hat under one arm. Me presenting to a board of investors in Atlanta, gesturing at blueprints projected on a screen. Me walking through O'Hare Airport 5 years ago, dragging a suitcase, looking exhausted and invisible in a sea of travelers. "What is this?" My voice came out smaller than I wanted. He moved behind me, close enough that I could feel the heat of him against my back. His finger traced over one particular photo, me standing in front of the Jensen Tower in Chicago, the building I'd designed that had made my career. The building that had also broken me when my firm's senior partners erased my name from the credits. 5 years ago, he said quietly, I was in Chicago for a territorial negotiation. I saw this building and asked who designed it. They gave me 3 male names, but I did my research. I always do my research. I couldn't breathe, couldn't process what he was saying. The Busan project wasn't coincidence, Vivienne. I've been directing contracts your way for 3 years. Seoul, Singapore, Tokyo. I needed you qualified enough, respected enough, that when I finally brought you here, no one would question it. I turned to face him, and the obsidian eyes that had terrified me now looked almost vulnerable. "You've been stalking me?" "I've been waiting for you." He caught my hand, pressed it against his chest where his heart hammered against my palm. "You think this started in that penthouse? This started the moment I learned a brilliant woman was being erased by mediocre men. I've been curating your entire path to me." The conference room smelled like expensive cigars and old grudges. I wasn't supposed to be there, but Jae-sung's hand on my lower back kept me anchored to his side as we faced the council of men who'd built Seoul's underground with blood and silence. Their faces were carved from stone, eyes tracking me like I was evidence at a crime scene. Elder Kim spoke first, his Korean slow and deliberate. Jae-sung translated without breaking eye contact with the man. "He says I've dishonored the old agreements, that bringing you into my world has made me weak." I felt the weight of every gaze. 42 years of being underestimated had taught me to recognize contempt, and this room was drowning in it. The woman too old, too foreign, too wrong for a man of Jae-sung's position. "The Zhao family has offered alliance," another elder continued in English, clearly for my benefit. "The Nakamura Gumi from Tokyo, even the Busan factions. They will unite against you, Min Jae-sung, unless you correct this indulgence." Indulgence. Like I was a sports car he'd bought on impulse. Jae-sung's fingers tightened at my waist. "Not possessive, protective. And what do they demand? Send her home, Marry the Choi daughter as planned. Restore order. Elder Kim leaned forward. Or we withdraw our protection. You'll stand alone against 4 syndicates. Your empire will burn and you with it. The room held its breath. I started to step away to make this easier for him, but Jae-sung's arm became steel. He turned to me, ignoring every powerful man in that room, and his eyes held something that looked like reverence. They're asking me to choose between my throne and my soul, he said quietly, then louder to the council. I choose her. The room erupted, and I realized with devastating clarity I'd just become the match that would burn his entire world down. The explosion came at 3:47 p.m., just as I was reviewing the reinforcement specs for the East Wing. One moment I was arguing with the contractor about load calculations. The next, the world turned white and loud and wrong. I didn't hear the blast so much as feel it, a pressure wave that slammed through my chest and knocked the tablet from my hands. The conference room windows shattered inward, glass rain glittering in the smoke-filled air. Someone screamed. Maybe it was me. When my hearing came back, it brought chaos with it. Alarms shrieking, men shouting in Korean, the acrid smell of burning insulation and something worse underneath it. I stumbled toward the door, legs unsteady, and that's when I saw him. Seo-Jin was already moving through the smoke, gun drawn, his face locked in that deadly calm I'd seen the night we met. Blood soaked through his white shirt at the shoulder, spreading dark and wet. But he didn't slow down. Didn't even seem to notice. His eyes found mine across the wreckage. "Stay down," he ordered, voice cutting through the noise. I should have listened, should have ducked behind the overturned table and let him handle it like he handled everything else in his world. But I watched him sway slightly, watched him brace one hand against the wall to steady himself, and something in my chest cracked open. I was crossing the room before I made the conscious decision to move. "You're bleeding!" "I said stay down, Vivienne!" His free hand caught my arm, grip iron tight despite the blood loss. "This isn't your fight!" My phone buzzed in my pocket. Once, twice, insistent. I pulled it out with shaking hands. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, almost threw it aside to focus on the man bleeding in front of me, but something made me swipe to accept. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was male, smooth, pleased with itself. Speaking English with a faint accent I couldn't place. "Ms. Amnell, how does it feel?" "Who is this?" "He chose you." A pause, deliberate and cruel. "Now watch him lose everything because of you. His alliances, his empire, his blood, all of it, falling apart because the Black Viper thought a 42-year-old American architect was worth dying for." The line went dead. I looked up at Seo-Jin, really looked at him. His shoulder was worse than I'd thought. The bullet must have gone clean through, judging by the exit wound staining the back of his jacket. His jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. But his eyes were on me. Only me. Even as his world literally burned around us, he was watching me with an intensity that made my throat close. "This is my fault," I whispered. "No." He stepped closer, backing me against the wall despite his injury, despite the sirens screaming closer. "This is the price, and I'd pay it again." Behind him, I could see his men regrouping, could hear more vehicles arriving. Enemies or reinforcements I didn't know. The smoke made everything ghostly and uncertain. I was the woman they said was too old to be loved. And I'd just become the reason the most dangerous man in Busan might lose everything. If you've ever been the one to stay when you should have run, don't leave me alone in this moment. Subscribe and like to show your loyalty because true love deserves to be seen to the end.